For those of you that are new to our organization, we are an organization that promotes awareness and understanding of the world and its people. And we do this through public forums, through hosting international visitors, working on educational programs with higher ed institutes, students, faculty, staff, community. And to go into the detail of all of this, James has pulled together a PowerPoint to present to everyone today. So I'll turn it over to James to get into the detail of the organization, and then we'll open it back up for some Q&A with both of us. James, take it away.
Thank you all so much for having us. My name is James. I'm a program manager here at the Vermont Council on World Affairs. And as Tricia mentioned, I'll be sort of giving an overview of the operations of the organization and detail some of our programs and initiatives that we're working on. But before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for having us. You know, it's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to meet all of you and share a little bit about our organization. So I'll start things off by saying the Vermont Council on World Affairs is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You know, we are headquartered out of Burlington, Vermont, and we were founded in 1952 by Ambassador Warren Austin. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Warren Austin was a senator from Vermont who served as the first United States ambassador to the United Nations. And after his service, he returned to Vermont and established our organization with the goal of bringing Vermont to the world and the world to Vermont. And it's really our pleasure to be able to continue to pursue that goal of bringing Vermont to the world and the world to Vermont through our work. And I'll outline and sort of give an overview of our work by categorizing it into our 4 pillar programs that I have outlined here on the screen. Our international visitor programs, our international tours, our public forums, and our youth programs. And so throughout this presentation, I hope to give you all a better idea of what these 4 pillar programs really are and what they look like and how you might be able to engage in them. So let's get started. So our first international visitor programs is our first pillar program that I'll dive into. And our most significant program is our International Visitor Leadership Program. Now this is our sort of premier program focused on citizen diplomacy. You know, we believe that, you know, everyday Vermonters and common citizens in Vermont and common citizens all around the world, when they have the opportunity to get together and connect and exchange dialogue and exchange experiences and exchange cultures, really have the opportunity to make a difference in our world and make connections that can be long-lasting and impactful. So this is a program that we've been working on for many years in partnership with the United States Department of State. And we're proud to say that last year, we actually welcomed over 200 international visitors to Vermont to participate in this program and really enjoy these professional exchanges that we're implementing for them. Now, you know, these groups have a wide variety of topics and themes that they'll address during their exchanges. You know, we've put together professional exchanges for these groups focused on themes like women's entrepreneurship, renewable energy development, fostering international trade, youth leadership, journalism, you name it. We've probably designed some sort of exchange program for our International Visitor Leadership Program to focus on and engage with local Vermonters, you know, who are working in these fields. And we're delighted to say that, you know, recently we relaunched our International Visitor Leadership Program virtually, and we are hosting international delegations through Zoom actually right now. So that's a lot of fun working that transition and still being able to facilitate these connections that are really, really so impactful. Our next international visitor program that I'll speak of is our Open World program that is somewhat similar in format to our International Visitor Leadership Program. Now this is a program that we work on in partnership with the U.S. Library of Congress. And it primarily works with participants from former Soviet nations. So, you know, we host a lot of programs for Russians, Ukrainians. Last year we had a delegation of parliamentarians from North Macedonia. Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, we've hosted a lot of different groups this program to come to Vermont for typically 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks, and participate in a professional exchange program here on the ground, where they'll be meeting with their local counterparts and having discussions in their field of interest. Now, one of my favorite elements of this program, as well as one of the most special elements of it for our participants, is while they're here in the United States for that 10-day to 2-week program, they actually have the opportunity to live with Vermont host families. And it's such a great way for them to get to know our culture, the Vermont values that make us sort of unique in the United States and in the world, and really get to know what American life is like, and really get to live that themselves. So that's a really sort of unique and special element of this open world program. Furthermore, we have our Young Leaders of the Americas initiative. This is a program we've been working on for a few years as well. Each year we'll welcome about 10 different fellows from 10 different nations across Latin America to participate in month-long fellowships with 10 different Vermont-based organizations or businesses. These fellowships are uniquely designed to be mutually beneficial to not only the young entrepreneurs and fellows from Latin America, but also to the Vermont-based organizations in which they're being hosted. And you'll see the logos of last year's host organizations presented here on the screen, based out of Burlington, or around Burlington. And I'm really pleased to say that both our Open World program and our Young Leaders of the Americas initiative are going virtual, which really expands our opportunity to engage communities like yours that are a little bit farther from our headquarters in Burlington, and really to expand our statewide engagement. So more on Young Leaders of the Americas initiative later. We do have some opportunities to engage with people that I would like to elaborate on later in the presentation. So I'll come back to this. Our next pillar program that I'll speak briefly on are our international tours. So the VCWA will design international tour packages for our members to participate in international travel to different countries. We've organized trips and tours to Cuba, China, Albania. And these are really sort of uniquely designed tours where our members who are participating in them will have an opportunity to kind of get off the beaten path of typical tourist destinations and really get to know the rich culture and beauty of the countries that we're visiting. As you can imagine, these tours are currently postponed, currently not being implemented due to travel restrictions, but we hope to get them back up and started as soon as it's safe to do so. Our next pillar program I'll speak to are public forums. And there are a few public forum programs that we have within them. The first I'll speak to is our Ambassador Series. So we have the honor of hosting multiple ambassadors every year here in Vermont to meet with Vermonters, to meet with students, to sort of speak towards their experience as an ambassador in the Foreign Service. Now we've hosted retired ambassadors and current ambassadors to share their insight on world affairs and their unique perspective serving as a high-ranking diplomat. It's been a really unique opportunity to continue this ambassador series virtually. Pictured here, you can see we hosted Ambassador Charles Ray and Ambassador Alam Thomas for a discussion on race and diplomacy and the influences that race will have on them as ambassadors, and a discussion moderated by Denise Johnson. And on a similar note, we also have our speaker series, which is somewhat similar in structure. We'll be hosting different diplomats, authors, and thought leaders to meet with Vermonters to present their unique perspectives on world affairs, as well as meet with local students and share sort of their insights with our youth. Let's see. Pictured here is a meeting we had as part of our Great Decisions program. Now, our Ambassador Series, Speaker Series, while it's typically sort of a more formal presentation format, we like to give our members an opportunity to sort of engage in world affairs in a more intimate setting. And that's really accomplished here through our Great Decisions program. So Great Decisions is sort of a casual roundtable discussion that we facilitate, where folks will get together, I believe it's 8 different times over the course of a couple months, to just kind of chat about different issues in world affairs, read scholarly articles, and meet with thought leaders to discuss sort of some of the world's most pressing issues of today. Pictured here was a virtual Great Decisions meeting that we hosted earlier this year. In the past, we always had our meetings in person, of course, but here was a meeting that we hosted with the Consul General of India in New York to discuss some of the issues that are presented at the India-Pakistan border with our Great Decisions discussion group. We also host a variety of community events, or I'll sort of highlight our trivia nights that we host. This is sort of maybe one of those moments where I'd hope to get a laughter out of folks, but won't be able to hear it. This was our most recent spooky trivia that we hosted for Halloween, where we had a big group of members come together. You can't see them all pictured here, unfortunately. We had a big group of members come together, though, virtually and engage in one of our international trivia nights. Everybody came in costume, and it was really a great way to celebrate our membership, sort of have all of our members reconnect in this sort of light, fun setting, and also put their knowledge to the test of world affairs. So hosting events like this that are sort of feel good and a little bit less professional is a really fun way for us to engage our membership as well. I should mention that earlier this year, for the very first time, we hosted a virtual conference, the Engage the World 2020 virtual conference from September 21st to September 24th, where we had the goal of connecting global citizens invested in awareness and understanding of the world and its people through substantive virtual programming. To kick us off of the event, to kick us off at the conference, we were very honored to welcome Senator Leahy to deliver some very warm remarks. And throughout the program, we have the opportunity to host over 4 different ambassadors, other diplomats, authors, thought leaders, as well as we had a chef walk us through a cooking class. We had a dance instructor zoom in from Uganda. So it was really a fun virtual conference with over 20 different events, filled with serious and very substantive discussions and informal events, as well as sort of casual opportunities for cultural exchange. You can picture it here. I have a photo from our virtual cooking class we hosted with one of our former alumni of a program we hosted. She was calling in from Guatemala, where she taught us how to make Guatemalan tostadas, one of her favorite dishes, which is a really kind of fun way to participate in cultural exchange in that sense. And we're also delighted to say that we were able to provide a free admission to the virtual conference for over 20 high school students from, I believe it was 5 or 6 high schools around the state. And it was a really phenomenal opportunity for our young leaders in Vermont to sort of hear expert opinions and hear unique perspectives on world affairs, as well as participate in virtual cultural exchange. Or in this case, we called it culinary diplomacy. So last but not least, and on a similar note, I'll explain some of our youth programs that we hosted. As you can tell, partnering with local high schools is a big priority of ours. Pictured here, this was a really intimate chat that we had with Ambassador Daniel Mulhall, the Irish ambassador to the United States. Last year, he congregated a group of students in the Essex Library for a discussion on how young leaders can engage in world affairs. It was a really phenomenal discussion. We have our Academic World Quest, which is sort of a national competition for high school students to compete, sort of like almost like in a trivia type of setting, or where local high school students in Vermont can form teams to compete against other high school students around the United States about their knowledge of world affairs, history, geography, sort of you name it. We also host our Pan-Africa Youth Leadership Program. Each year we'll host around 20 to 25 young leaders from typically 4 different countries across Africa to enjoy a 2-week exchange program here on the ground in Vermont. They will, while they're here, stay with local host families, and through that way, really get to know our way of life here in Vermont and make some lifelong connections. And during the day, 9 to 5 with us, they'll participate in professional programming related to youth leadership, civic engagement, project management, volunteerism, entrepreneurship, you name it. Pictured here was our delegation from, I think it was 2018, meeting with Governor Phil Scott, and we've been lucky enough to have Governor Scott and some of our other congressional delegation meet with a lot of these groups as well. Here is a photo of our Iraqi Young Leaders Exchange Program, which is a program very similar in format to our Pan-Africa Youth Leadership Program. It's a 2-week exchange program for a group of Iraqi high school students to come to Vermont and live with American host families and participate in a 2-week exchange, related to youth leadership, peace building, civic engagement, and a lot of other really phenomenal topics that our students get to engage in. This is an obligatory photo I had to include from one of our trips visit to Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, which is, of course, a highlight of everyone's time in Vermont. A lot of fun there. We also have our Changemakers Summit. Last year, we followed up on our Pan-Africa Youth Leadership Program, or you can see the acronym here, PALIP. We followed up on our Pan-Africa Youth Leadership Program here with a reverse exchange hosted that our executive director, Patricia, actually organized and hosted in Tanzania. And we were able to follow up on that program with a reverse exchange that, actually ended up congregating and bringing together 40 different Tanzanian high school students and 7 of their adult mentors for a 3-day sort of summit focused on discussing equity, civic engagement, project management, and really honing in on their skills and discussing how we can all stay connected and help facilitate a better future as young leaders. Really an outstanding summit that we were able to organize in Tanzania and take some of our experience with the students here in Vermont back to their home country. And so, in summary, our annual impact is it's dare I say hard to measure, but we try to do so in a lot of different ways. Through our typical programming, we engage or we facilitate over 1,200 points of cross-cultural contact just from connecting international visitors and leaders with their local counterparts here in Vermont, whether it be in person or virtually. These cross-cultural contacts and connections are really meaningful and impactful. A typical year, we're hosting over 200 visitors, sometimes even closer to 300 visitors from over 60 different countries, facilitating and participating in hundreds of professional meetings. Through our public forums and sort of community events and whatnot, we're facilitating hundreds of opportunities for Vermonters to network with other like-minded or globally engaged Vermonters. We're hosting dozens of speakers here in Vermont, from ambassadors to authors, you name it, as well as generating a quite significant over $1 million economic impact here in our state. Now, you might be wondering, how can we get involved? And I'll encourage you to become a member. It's the best way to do so. And there are various levels of membership. And I encourage you to visit www.vcwa.org or send me an email at james@vcwa.org to discuss membership more. And all of that information will be at the end of this presentation, so no need to frantically write or anything. But becoming a member really gives you a great opportunity to engage in these pillar programs in a lot of different ways. You can virtually host visitors through hour-long cultural exchanges that we host and put together for our Vermonters to meet with the delegations that we're hosting virtually. If you think you have relevant professional experience or background, you can meet with delegations in virtual settings. You can attend our events, and all of our members get discounted or free admission to our events. If your organization or business or you personally are interested in supporting events, we would love to have a conversation with you about sponsoring one of our events or programs. and come to our public events and get to know our other members and expand your network of globally minded Vermonters. When it's safe to do so, and hopefully soon, when we're hosting our youth programs again, we'd love to have you all serve as host families for our students, and we'd love to have you all join us on international tours. Now, as promised, some of our upcoming opportunities to engage with our organization, we are currently looking for businesses and organizations interested in hosting a virtual fellowship for our Latin American entrepreneurs as part of our Young Leaders of the Americas initiative. We are also looking for youth ambassadors from the age of 18 to 29 or cultural performers based out of Vermont interested in participating at the World Expo 2020 Dubai. And for those of you who may not be familiar with World Expo, it is essentially like the Olympics, but for culture and innovation. So every 5 years in a different city, there's a mega event where hundreds of nations around the world come together to highlight and discuss their cultures and their innovations. This year it was supposed to be hosted in Dubai, and it's currently postponed until September 2021. And we are currently actively recruiting youth ambassadors and cultural performers to act as sort of the face of the United States, as well as sort of serve as a human element to represent our country in Dubai at the World Expo in 2020. Now, that was a lot of information, and some of these opportunities to engage with our organization are quite unique. And I encourage you to please stay in touch with us. And if you have any questions about them or would like more detailed information on what these opportunities might look like, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, my name is James. I'm a program manager here. My email is listed as well as my phone number. You can please feel free to shoot me a message or give me a call whenever is convenient for you. I'd be delighted to discuss our opportunities to engage our organization more, or just to chat about membership or our organization in general at any point. So thank you so much again for having us. That concludes my presentation. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and please, if there are any questions or comments, I welcome them now. Thank you.
I'll kick things off, and I'm just amazed at all the programs that you run. I mean, it's such a wide range. I mean, there's some interesting parallels with what Rotary does as well. Rotary has an international exchange program. It's involved at the high school level. They've done overseas trips. Part of Rotary is the Interact Club in the high school. Of course, a lot of that has been put on hold this year, but I think it's awesome that so much of this you're continuing to do and really persevering, on Zoom. And I mean, I'm just overwhelmed by all this stuff. And, a lot of times in Bennington, we feel more connected to the Albany area through media. But I mean, there's so much stuff happening up in northern Vermont and central Vermont, and this is really helpful. The one comment I wanted to make is on your legislative exchange program, we actually have two members of the Vermont legislature in the call. We have Mary Morrissey, who is a long-term member of the Vermont House, and Mike Nigro, elected this week. So, I mean, I think, it's very relevant what you're saying. I don't really have any specific questions as much as this is a fantastic, fire hose of information. And I'm really excited to see what we as Rotary can do to work with you to bring this program into view in southern Vermont.
Thank you. So it's actually, as we're sitting here right now, this gathering reminds me a lot of our Great Decisions program. I think in the way that it's sort of set up, but instead of talking about the organization itself, we're talking about very specific foreign policy pieces, and we follow this book. And it's a way, if anyone's sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, we're landlocked, but I still want to make sure that I'm understanding what's happening in foreign policy X or this global Y, I would definitely encourage you to check that program out and see if that would be a good fit for you. Because while I would also suggest our speaker series program and a ton of other stuff, it's just this particular format. If you enjoy this, I think you would also enjoy the Great Decisions program.
Question. Your program for students, that's all based up in Burlington. So if we wanted to host, if anyone down here wanted to host a family, that would be impractical. But do you ever have these programs other than in Burlington?
James, do you want to take that?
Yeah, when it comes to homestay hosting, a lot of our programs are based out of Burlington because that's sort of where we're headquartered. However, now that things are kind of virtual for the next year, we are facilitating a lot of these virtual connections and having groups, participate in virtual cultural exchanges, like I mentioned. And that's a really great opportunity if you're interested in sort of meeting some of our students or our professional visitors that we're hosting, to engage in that capacity as well. Though you're right, it is sort of difficult to host when you're when things are based out of Burlington and the students have to go back and forth. But sort of engaging in that transportation logistics, we try to be as accommodating as possible. But yeah.
So one thing that I would add on to what James is saying is that two things. One is when we're back in person again, we might not be able to have you host the students because, as James said, logistically that'd be too difficult of a drive, but we do bring the students around the entire state for their programming. So if you see a program come up and you say, oh, there's this young leadership program, I know this great resource, or I really want to connect my friend to this, or X, Y, and Z, always reach out. Because we've got a bus for one group, and actually James usually drives the van for the other smaller group, and we can head anywhere if it's the right fit. And so we don't know what we don't know. And if you're sitting there thinking, but I have these great resources, please reach out to us, because we want to engage the rest of the state as much as possible. And the second thing I would say is, while we're virtual, James had mentioned the fact that we're doing these virtual exchanges and host exchanges now. And I want to just share one quick story. And it was, we have been trying to pull together an international cooking class for, 6 years now. And it's just logistically been incredibly difficult. And when everything went virtual, we had this really unique opportunity to have everyone in their own kitchens. There was no liabilities or fires or flames that could happen on our watch. And we were able to film people. And not only did it allow us to host it, but it also allowed us to go abroad for all of our cooks. So we're getting people really in their country, in their home country, doing this. And one of the youth leaders that came with the group from Tanzania offered to bring us into his home. And because of the time difference, it was late and kind of dark, but they had flashlights and lights held up, and he was cooking, and we were in his kitchen, in his home, and he was showing us around. And it's, I think the sort of kitchen that many people that were on the line probably have never seen before, been exposed to, or been into someone's home in Tanzania. And even if you've traveled through many countries, sometimes you're not invited into the home, right? And for the folks that were able to be a part of that conversation, and he's cooking this, I don't know if any of you have heard of chips my eye, but it's this really popular kind of children's dish it's essentially like an omelet with French fries, but with a Tanzanian flair. But he just was so proud of this dish, and his kitchen was just like such a heartwarming thing to be brought into his space. And those are the kinds of things that like really touch us on this side, but that you can also do with students on the other side, or with, other folks that are dying to get to Vermont and have heard so much about it from other people that have done the program and can't come over the next year or two. And they've been on a wait list for years, right? So even just getting to meet with you and you're like, and this is our maple syrup, or whatever it might be that you want to showcase Vermont about I just really wanted to touch on the fact that right now we have an opportunity to have these powerful moments, regardless of not being able to connect face to face.
Great.
Mike.
For the both of you, I believe you indicated that you're a 501c3. I guess, sort of a two-part question. What sort of various sources does your funding come from? And like, how large is the organization?
Yeah, so the size of the organization, you're looking at it.
Okay, I was thinking that was it, but
we've always been a very small organization. I do want to give credit to our phenomenal interns that come in and out, who just really help us, because otherwise, it's really everything we shared with you. We do all of that, and there's a lot more that goes along with it, as I'm sure all of you know, who've been involved with nonprofits or other organizations around the state. But COVID hit us hard, and we became an even smaller team because of COVID. And our resources come primarily through large fundraisers. So that was typically our annual dinner where we had an in-person dinner. This year, we pulled together in about 6 weeks a massive virtual conference that filled that hole. And then membership, and we run the PALIP and ILIP. These are fee-for-service programs. So that's a revenue stream. And then the International Visitors Leadership Program is a part of a grant through the ECA at the State Department. And so, I mean, it's not a fully funded program, but they do give us support to help run the program.
That's a very impressive list of things that you folks, the two of you, do.
Thank you.
It's amazing. I had a quick question. I noticed that there's an organization that seems to be a coordinating body among the different state council on world affairs. And how is all that? How do you relate to that organization?
That's a great question. So there are two. I've made a note to talk about this because I think you'd referenced it earlier. But so there are two organizations: the World Affairs Council of America and Global Ties US. And they're both based in DC, and they're essentially organizations that are the head of our networks. So we're an organization that we are members of both of these networks. So how that works is, because we are a member of the Global Ties US, we have access to running the International Visitors Leadership Program. We hear about all of the youth programming. And then we have this cohort and these colleagues from all around the country. So for Global Ties US, which is more of the international visitor programming stuff, there are over 90 organizations in the US that are just like that. There's typically one in each state, but in Texas, I think there's 4, and in California, I think there's like 10. So in Vermont, there's one Global Ties US member, and that's the Vermont Council on World Affairs. Then there's the World Affairs Council of America, and there's about 1 per state. I think there's maybe some states have more than one, so there might be between 50 and 60 organizations. And the World Affairs Council of America is more focused on the international speakers and the ambassador and the content speaker series, civil discourse, foreign policy side of things. And again, that's a whole nother network of people that are colleagues across the state. And there is another council in Southern Vermont. And I'm trying to think of where they are. I think that I think they maybe have probably 3 or 4 events a year. So I think they're much smaller, and they just really have those speaker series events, but I do know that they exist. And then there's a handful of us that are both. And I say there's about 20 of us that are both World Affairs and Global Ties. And we kind of bring together the education piece for students and community members, the civil discourse piece, and then the Global Ties stuff, which is the international visitors and exchange component. And then as an organization, we have independently decided to start running international tours abroad. So as James mentioned, we've run trips to Cuba and to China, and then last year we ran the Changemaker Summit in Tanzania.
Yeah, that's all fascinating. I mean, locally here in our Rotary, we have a little international involvement. Marsh and Cindy were instrumental in supporting an orphanage in Kenya through a local nonprofit, HEAL. And so we've been involved with that to some extent, but I mean, this is really inspirational to see the level of international involvement you're bringing to Vermont. And, I've always thought of Vermont as sort of like the ideal democracy, where we have a high degree of transparency, a high degree of citizen involvement. So how have your visitors from overseas seen that? Is it a shock for them to see such transparency in some cases? I mean, do they bring that spirit back to where they come from?
James, I'm going to let you take this, but I'm going to start by just saying that definitely yes. And that's a huge program that James works on and runs. But the one thing that I wanted to add is that my favorite thing is when they see town meeting day. If it times out perfectly, it's such a literal foreign concept, and so many other states don't have it. It's kind of a pride point for us to either have them observe one or speak with people that help lead or participate in them. And that's something that all of them say, I want to implement this in some way when I get to my home country. This is such a great forum and process. And I know that we might be a little bit more critical of that process ourselves, because, but it is something that's really special, and it's nice to be reminded of that.
Yeah, I'll echo what Tricia said, and that's a really great point you bring up around, Vermont's transparency and in our democracy. It's certainly something that we highlight in our programming, and sort of our U.S. Department of State has certainly recognized Vermont as sort of a leader in this, and so we do host a lot of different projects focused on good governance, elections, as well as I think it's also important to tie in journalism to that discussion as well. Vermont has a really strong journalism industry. So, we had a lot of folks who meet with VT Digger to cover sort of their election coverage, or to discuss sort of their election coverage, as well as their investigative journalism work, meeting with VPR, and so many other organizations like that. So, yeah, it is a lot of fun connecting international visitors in this way, and town meeting day, like Tricia said, is certainly a lot of fun to expose international visitors to. And I think it does make a really long-lasting impression on these folks, as well as a lot of long-lasting connections that they can meet when they're meeting with different elected officials here in our state. And I know that you mentioned there are a few members of the House represented here today too. So, when we have these programs virtually, I would love to make that connection. And we do like to encourage conversations with our elected officials and our international visitors when it's appropriate to do so. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, great. This is a really great presentation. So tremendously appreciated.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen and to engage in this. And I hope that you do, visit our website, vcwa.org, see a little bit more about it. If you have questions, if you look at it and you're kind of like, hey, I didn't hear them mention this, I'm curious about this, shoot us a message. We're around, we're available. And it really is a priority of ours to connect with everyone around the whole state. So I'm first of all very glad you reached out. And second of all, I'm really excited to be connected.
Great. Thank you.